The Zephyrian Empire had spent the better part of 3 millennia convincing itself that civilization was measured by the height of one's technology and the depth of one's philosophical discourse. Their crystal spires reached toward distant stars, their neural networks processed thoughts faster than light could travel, and their combat arenas, were marvels of engineering that could simulate any environment from the frigid methane storms of Kepler 442b to the crushing gravity wells of neutron stars. What they hadn't quite figured out, despite all this technological wizardry, was that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the universe comes in a surprisingly small package. But then again, if the Zephyrians were known for their wisdom rather than their arrogance, they probably wouldn't have built an empire based on throwing captives into gladiatorial combat for entertainment. The current object of their misplaced confidence stood barely 5'4" in their standard gravity, with brown hair that hadn't seen proper maintenance in weeks and the kind of lean build that suggested either excellent genetics or a lifetime of running from things that wanted to eat her. Commander Vextai of the 47th Subjugation Fleet looked down at his latest prize with the sort of satisfaction typically reserved for discovering a new species of decorative fungus. This is what the humans sent to defend their colony. Vextai's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his species. His subordinates, a collection of various alien species united only by their shared belief in Zephyrian superiority, joined in with their own versions of amusement. Their warriors must be truly pathetic if this is their idea of a soldier. The human in question, Kessa, though her captors hadn't bothered learning her name, said nothing. She'd learned during her 3 days in their holding cells that engaging with her captors only provided them with more entertainment. Instead, she catalogued details, the positioning of guards, the energy signatures of their weapons, the slight tremor in the ship's hull that suggested they were approaching a large gravitational body. Old habits from her time with the Colonial Defense Corps died hard. "Look at those tiny hands," continued Lieutenant Grex, a particularly unimaginative Zephyrian, whose idea of wit involved stating obvious physical differences. How could something so small possibly hold a proper weapon? And those eyes, they're positioned forward like a prey animal. No proper predator has forward-facing eyes. If Kessa found irony in a species with forward-facing eyes criticizing her ocular arrangement, she kept it to herself. The Zephyrians, for all their self-proclaimed intelligence, had apparently never studied evolutionary biology beyond their own world. Forward-facing eyes weren't for prey, they were for predators who needed depth perception to calculate the precise distance to their target. The ship shuddered as it entered the atmosphere of Nexus Prime, the Zephyrian Empire's capital world and home to the most prestigious combat arenas in the galaxy. These weren't crude colosseums, where warriors fought with primitive weapons. No, the Zephyrians had elevated the art of combat entertainment to include exotic environments, genetically modified creatures, and technology that could make the fight appear fair while ensuring maximum spectacle. "The crowds will love this," Vextai mused, studying the data tablet that contained Kessa's basic biological readings. A human female against the Razorclaw. The betting pools are already favoring a kill within the first 30 seconds. Some optimists are giving her a full minute. The Razorclaw. Kessa had heard the other prisoners whispering about it in a dozen different languages. A genetically enhanced killing machine that combined the worst traits of several apex predators from across the galaxy. It stood 12 feet tall, possessed reflexes that made a striking cobra look sluggish, and had never lost a fight in the arena. The Zephyrians were particularly proud of it, considering it the perfect synthesis of their technological advancement and their understanding of what made an effective killer. They were about to learn that their understanding had some significant gaps. The transport landed with the kind of smooth precision that only came from technology so advanced it made anti-gravity look like a party trick. Kessa was marched through corridors that gleamed with a metallic sheen, past viewing windows that offered glimpses of a city that stretched beyond the horizon in perfect geometric patterns. Everything was clean, ordered, efficient, the kind of place where violence was sanitized and packaged for consumption. The arena itself was a monument to excess disguised as sophisticated entertainment. It could hold nearly 1 million spectators across multiple dimensional viewing platforms, each offering perfect sightlines regardless of the laws of physics. The fighting space in the center could be reconfigured to simulate any environment, from dense jungle to open ocean to the vacuum of space itself. Today, it was configured as a rocky canyon with multiple levels and hiding spots, the kind of terrain that would give a smaller fighter some advantage against a larger opponent. Not that the Zephyrians expected their human captive to use those advantages effectively. Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted beings, the announcer's voice echoed across multiple dimensions of space, translated instantly into every language spoken by the diverse crowd. Today we present a special exhibition, a human female, captured from the recently pacified colony of New Terran, will face our undefeated champion. The crowd's reaction was a mixture of amusement and curiosity. Humans were a relatively new addition to the galactic community, having only achieved faster-than-light travel within the past century. Most of the assembled aliens knew them primarily as a species that had inexplicably managed to colonize dozens of worlds despite their apparent technological limitations and biological fragility. Kessa was pushed into a preparation chamber where she could see the arena through a transparent aluminum barrier. The space was currently empty except for the rocky terrain and a few scattered pieces of debris that might serve as improvised weapons. Standard arena protocol allowed combatants to use whatever they could find, though most creatures relied on their natural weapons and abilities. Any last words, human? Grex asked, apparently finding the situation amusing enough to justify conversation. Kessa looked at him with the kind of calm that comes from accepting an unavoidable situation. You might want to increase the life insurance on your champion. The aliens found this hilarious. The arena gates opened with a mechanical precision that spoke to thousands of years of refined engineering. Kessa stepped into the rocky canyon and immediately began what her old instructors would have recognized as a tactical assessment. Sight lines, potential cover positions, environmental hazards, escape routes, all catalogued and prioritized in the space of seconds. The crowd's murmur grew louder as she moved. They'd expected cowering, pleading, or at least some display of appropriate fear. Instead, they were watching someone who moved like she belonged in a combat zone. And now, the announcer's voice boomed across the arena, the undefeated champion of Nexus Prime, the genetic masterpiece that has claimed over 300 victories, the Razorclaw. The opposite gate began to iris open, and the crowd fell into an expectant hush. The Razorclaw didn't emerge so much as flow into the arena, its movements so fluid they seemed to defy the normal constraints of anatomy. 12 feet of engineered lethality, with retractable claws that could cut through starship hull plating and reflexes, enhanced beyond any natural creature's capabilities. It was, by any objective measure, a perfect killing machine. The creature's sensory organs locked onto Kessa immediately, and it began moving toward her with the confidence of a predator that had never encountered effective resistance. The crowd leaned forward in anticipation of what would surely be a brief and violent spectacle. That's when the arena's lighting systems, designed to ensure perfect visibility for all spectators, caught the metallic gleam of something hanging around Kessa's neck. Dog tags, standard issue from the Colonial Defense Corps, stamped with basic identification information and classification codes. The arena's translation systems, programmed to process and display any text for the entertainment of the diverse crowd, dutifully projected the information on holographic displays throughout the venue. Name Kessa Chen serial number, CDC 7749 Alpha blood type, O-negative classification, apex predator. The crowd's murmur died as if someone had thrown a switch. Apex predator. The question rippled through the stands in a dozen languages. Most of the assembled aliens were familiar with the concept in abstract terms. Every world had species that sat at the top of their local food chains, but the way humans used the term carried implications that were just beginning to sink into the collective consciousness of 1 million spectators. In the VIP section, xenobiologist Dr. Thiss pulled up her personal database and began cross-referencing human evolutionary history. What she found made her respiratory systems skip several cycles. Humans hadn't just climbed to the top of their world's food chain through tool use and cooperation, though those factors had certainly helped. They'd gotten there by being pursuit predators, creatures that could track prey across vast distances, wearing them down through sheer persistence and endurance. They could run down animals that were individually faster, stronger, and better armed, simply by refusing to stop. But that wasn't the truly terrifying part. The truly terrifying part was that they'd done it while competing with other apex predators. Earth hadn't been dominated by one super predator that eventually evolved intelligence. It had been a world where multiple apex species had fought for supremacy, and humans had won by developing the ability to hunt anything, anywhere, under any conditions. They were persistence predators with tool-making intelligence and pack-hunting instincts, who had earned their position by being more dangerous than creatures specifically evolved for killing. And the Zephyrians had just locked one in an arena with their champion. The Razorclaw, unaware of the growing unease in the stands, continued its approach. Its movement pattern was exactly what Kessa had expected: confident, direct, designed to intimidate prey into making mistakes. She'd seen the same behavior in the big cats that had occasionally wandered near the colony settlement, and in the pack hunters that the colonists had learned to avoid during certain seasons. The difference was that those Earth-evolved predators had earned their confidence through millions of years of successful hunting. The Razorclaw had earned its confidence through 300 arena victories against opponents who had been selected specifically because they would provide entertaining deaths. Kessa picked up a piece of rocky debris about the size and weight of a throwing stone. The crowd interpreted this as a pathetic attempt at self-defense. They were about to learn the difference between a tool and a weapon in the hands of a species that had been making that distinction for over 2 million years. The Razorclaw lunged with the kind of speed that had made it undefeated. Its claws extended toward where Kessa had been standing, only to encounter empty air as she sidestepped with a efficiency that suggested this wasn't her first time avoiding death by dismemberment. The rock caught the creature in what would have been the temple on a human skull. The impact was precisely calculated, not hard enough to cause serious damage, but hard enough to disrupt its attack and demonstrate that its supposedly impossible to hit target was in fact quite hittable. More importantly, it established the basic dynamic that would define the rest of the fight. The Razorclaw was fast and deadly, but Kessa was faster where it mattered most, in her ability to process information and make tactical decisions. The creature recovered from its surprise and came again, this time with a more complex attack pattern that involved feints and misdirection. It was a sophisticated approach that had worked against every previous opponent. Kessa read the feint, ignored the misdirection, and was already moving before the real attack arrived. This time she didn't just dodge, she positioned herself so that her evasion left the Razorclaw slightly off balance and vulnerable to a counterstrike. The second rock hit the creature in the joint where its primary attack limb connected to its body. Again, the impact was precisely calibrated, this time to reduce the limb's effectiveness without causing permanent damage. Because despite what the crowd was beginning to suspect, Kessa wasn't trying to kill the Razorclaw. She was doing something far more unsettling from the perspective of the assembled aliens. She was hunting it. The distinction might seem academic, but it was actually the difference between the behavior of an apex predator and the behavior of a simple killer. Killers attacked until their target was dead. Predators studied their prey, learned its weaknesses, and then exploited those weaknesses with surgical precision. Over the next several minutes, as the crowd watched in increasingly uncomfortable silence, Kessa demonstrated exactly why humans had earned their position at the top of Earth's food chain. She didn't overpower the Razorclaw. She didn't need to. Instead, she systematically dismantled its advantages. When it relied on speed, she was already where she needed to be. When it used its superior strength, she made sure that strength was applied in directions that worked against the creature rather than for it. When it tried to use its enhanced senses to predict her movements, she gave it false information by controlling her scent trail and using the arena's acoustics to disguise the direction of her sounds. Most unsettling of all, she never seemed to be in a hurry. Each of her actions was deliberate, economical, designed to achieve maximum effect with minimum effort. She moved like someone who had unlimited time and patience, like someone who could maintain this level of performance for hours if necessary. The Razorclaw, meanwhile, was beginning to show signs of the kind of psychological stress that came from encountering prey that refused to behave like prey. Its attacks became less coordinated, more frantic. It had been engineered to dominate through superior physical capabilities, not to adapt to opponents who fought back effectively. Dr. Thiss, watching from the VIP section, pulled up additional files from the human database. What she found made her species equivalent of blood run cold. Humans didn't just hunt individually. They were pack hunters with sophisticated communication and coordination abilities. They could track prey across multiple terrain types and weather conditions. They could adapt their hunting strategies in real time based on their prey's behavior. And most terrifyingly, they could teach these skills to other humans, creating a cumulative knowledge base that grew with each generation. The human female in the arena wasn't just demonstrating individual capability, she was demonstrating the refined techniques of an entire species that had spent millennia perfecting the art of making anything else on their world into dinner. The fight, if it could still be called that, continued for another 10 minutes. By the end, the Razorclaw was exhausted, confused and moving with the kind of defeated body language that every predator species in the galaxy instinctively recognized. It had been systematically outclassed by an opponent that weighed less than half what it did, and carried no visible weapons. Kessa could have killed it at any point during the last 5 minutes. Instead, she simply stopped. She moved to the center of the arena and waited, her posture relaxed but alert, like someone who had completed a job and was ready to move on to the next task. The silence in the arena was absolute. Commander Vextai stared at the tactical displays in disbelief. According to his instruments, the human's heart rate had never exceeded what appeared to be a light exercise level. Her breathing was steady, her movements showed no signs of fatigue, and her stress hormones were actually lower than they had been when she was brought into the arena. She hadn't been fighting for her life, she'd been working. "Get me Admiral Krex immediately," Vextai ordered his communications officer. "Emergency priority. Sir, we need to recall every ship currently engaged in human pacification operations. Now, sir, I don't understand." That human female just conducted a tactical demonstration of predator capability that our best genetic engineers couldn't match. And according to our intelligence reports, she's not even a member of their primary military forces. She was colonial defense, local militia. The implications of that statement hung in the air like a toxic cloud. If their militia were capable of this level of combat effectiveness, what were their actual military forces like? More importantly, how many worlds had the Zephyrian Empire been casually conquering without realizing they were poking creatures that had earned the right to call themselves apex predators? In the arena, Kessa waited with the patience of someone who understood that the real fight had been taking place in the stands, not on the rocky terrain below. She'd accomplished exactly what she'd intended: demonstrate that human beings were not the easy prey that their captors had assumed. The betting pools, which had opened with odds heavily favoring a quick death for the human, were in chaos. Several major gambling syndicates were facing bankruptcy as they tried to figure out how to calculate odds for a species they'd completely misunderstood. Dr. Vex was frantically sending messages to xenobiological research institutes across the galaxy. Her preliminary analysis suggested that humans might be the most efficient predator species yet discovered, not the strongest or fastest, but the most adaptable and persistent. And in the depths of space, communication arrays were suddenly buzzing with urgent messages as the implications of the arena demonstration spread through the galactic community. Every species that had considered humans to be primitive backwater dwellers was rapidly reassessing their assumptions. Kessa, meanwhile, continued to wait in the center of the arena. She'd made her point, demonstrated her species' capabilities, and now it was time to see whether her captors were intelligent enough to understand what they'd witnessed. The answer came in the form of Vextai himself entering the arena, his weapons conspicuously holstered and his posture carefully non-threatening. "We seem to have made an error in judgment," he said. Kessa nodded. "Several, actually. But the day's still young. Would you be amenable to discussing terms for a peaceful resolution to our current situation?" "That depends. Are you planning to return me to my colony, compensate the families of the people your forces killed during your pacifications operation, and reconsider your expansion plans in human space? Vextai's mandibles clicked in what might have been nervous laughter. Those seem like reasonable starting points for negotiation. Good, because the alternative is that I explain to my government exactly how your empire's military operates, and they start treating your forces as hostile rather than merely misguided. The threat was delivered in the same calm tone she'd used throughout the entire encounter, but the implications were clear enough. If one human could systematically dismantle their champion, what could an organized human military force accomplish? In the stands, the crowd was beginning to disperse in unusually subdued groups. The entertaining spectacle they'd expected had turned into an uncomfortable lesson about the dangers of assumptions and the importance of understanding your opponents before engaging them. The Razorclaw had been led away to receive medical attention, its undefeated record broken but its life intact. In the grand scheme of things it had gotten off easy. Kessa could have killed it at any point, but she'd chosen not to. The creature's career as an arena champion was over, but it would live to see retirement. The Zephyrian Empire's expansion into human space, on the other hand, had just become considerably more complicated. As Kessa was escorted to more comfortable quarters to begin what were euphemistically called diplomatic discussions, she reflected on the irony of the situation. The Zephyrians had thought they were capturing a primitive warrior to provide entertainment for their sophisticated civilization. Instead, they'd accidentally demonstrated to their entire population that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the universe is the thing that doesn't look dangerous at all. And sometimes the most advanced civilization is the one that never forgot where it came from, or what it took to get there. The human species had climbed to the top of their world's food chain by being better at the fundamental game of survival than anything else on their planet. They'd carried those skills with them to the stars, along with the kind of practical wisdom that comes from never forgetting that in the universe's grand scheme of things, everyone is somebody else's potential dinner. The Zephyrians, for all their technological advancement and cultural sophistication, had apparently forgotten that basic truth. They wouldn't make that mistake again.